Have you ever met someone who seems quiet, but when they finally speak, everyone listens? Not because they talk more, but because they think differently. Deep thinkers often have one surprising trait that most people misunderstand, and chances are, if you have this trait too, you've probably felt different your whole life. Let's talk about it. People usually imagine deep thinkers as highly intelligent, serious, or naturally wise. But psychology suggests something more interesting. The people who think deeply often share one common trait. They question things constantly. Not out loud all the time, but internally. Their mind rarely accepts things at face value. And while this sounds like a strength, it can sometimes feel like a curse. Here's why. 1. They don't accept easy answers. Most people hear information, process it quickly, and move on. Deep thinkers? Not really. When someone says, things happen for a reason, they ask, what reason? When someone says, this is just how life works, they wonder, but why? Their brain keeps digging. Not because they want problems, but because surface-level answers rarely satisfy them. This constant questioning helps them understand things more deeply, but it also creates mental exhaustion, because sometimes their brain refuses to stop searching. And here's something strange. Many deep thinkers don't realize they're deep thinkers. They just assume everyone's brain works this way. It usually doesn't. Section 2. They replay conversations constantly. Have you ever replayed a conversation from 3 days ago? Analyzed your tone, their reaction, what you should have said? Deep thinkers often do this because their mind naturally searches for patterns, meaning, hidden signals. Sometimes this helps. Sometimes it becomes overthinking, and there's an important difference. Overthinking looks for certainty. Deep thinking looks for understanding, but when understanding never feels complete, those two can blend together. 3. They notice what others ignore. Deep thinkers often catch details others miss. Changes in behavior, tiny shifts in tone, contradictions, energy, patterns. Someone says they're okay, but their voice changes slightly. A deep thinker notices a friend slowly pulls away. A deep thinker notices. This awareness can make them great problem solvers, but it also means they absorb more information than most people, and carrying extra information means carrying extra mental weight. But the trait that affects deep thinkers the most usually isn't intelligence or curiosity. It's something else, and it quietly changes their relationships. 4. They feel misunderstood. Often, because deep thinkers spend so much time analyzing internally, they sometimes struggle explaining what's happening externally. People may call them too serious, too sensitive, too quiet, too intense. Meanwhile, their mind is processing 10 layers of information at once, not because they want to overcomplicate things, but because their brain naturally looks deeper. A simple conversation for most people can become 100 connected thoughts for them. They notice tone, facial expressions, timing, word choices, things left unsaid, and while everyone else moves on, their mind keeps connecting pieces. This creates a strange feeling, being surrounded by people, while still feeling alone. Not because nobody cares, but because translating complex thoughts into simple words is hard. Sometimes they explain something important, and here, you think too much. Or, it's not that deep. But to them, it is deep, because their brain rarely stops at the surface. And over time, many deep thinkers learn to stay quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, because explaining everything feels exhausting. So they keep more thoughts inside, which creates another problem. The more they stay inside their own head, the more misunderstood they often feel. And maybe that's why deep thinkers sometimes crave rare things more than popularity. not attention, not validation, just understanding. Because when someone finally understands how their mind works, it feels less like fitting in and more like finally being seen. 5. Solitude becomes important. Deep thinkers often need time alone, not because they hate people, not because they're antisocial, because constant input becomes overwhelming. Their brain is already busy. Adding non-stop noise makes it harder. Imagine having dozens of tabs open in your mind all day. Thoughts, questions, memories, future scenarios, conversations, possibilities. Now imagine adding constant notifications on top of that. Eventually, everything starts feeling loud. So they recharge differently. Silence feels productive. Walking alone feels productive. Thinking feels productive. Sometimes their favorite moments aren't parties or crowded rooms. It's quiet mornings, late night walks, driving with no music, sitting alone with their thoughts. And society sometimes mistakes this for isolation. People might say, you need to get out more. You're too quiet. Why are you always alone? But being alone and feeling lonely are not the same thing. For many deep thinkers, solitude isn't escape, it's maintenance. Because when they finally get space from constant stimulation, their mind can organize itself again. But there's also a downside. Spend too much time alone, and thoughts can become louder. Questions become bigger. Overthinking becomes easier. That's why balance matters. Deep thinkers don't always need less connection. Sometimes they just need connection that feels meaningful, because they're not always disconnecting. Sometimes they're processing, trying to make sense of things, trying to understand themselves. And sometimes, the quiet places become the only places where their mind finally slows down. 6. The hidden downside. Deep thinking sounds powerful, because it is, but it also has costs. Costs that people rarely talk about. Decision fatigue, mental exhaustion, analysis paralysis. Sometimes deep thinkers become trapped, searching for perfect answers, when imperfect action would help more, because the deeper you think, the easier it becomes to believe. One more thought will solve everything. Sometimes it won't. Deep thinkers often treat decisions differently. Small choices become bigger. Big choices become overwhelming. A simple decision, like changing jobs, starting a relationship, sending a message, or making a purchase, can turn into hours of mental processing, not because they're incapable, because their mind naturally explores every possible outcome. What if this goes wrong? What if there's a better option? What if I regret this later? And while careful thinking can protect you from mistakes, too much thinking creates different problems, because opportunities rarely wait for perfect certainty. Another hidden downside is mental exhaustion. People see someone sitting quietly and assume nothing much is happening. Meanwhile, their brain has been running a marathon all day. Constant analyzing burns energy. Constant questioning burns energy. Constant self-reflection burns energy. And eventually, even simple things can start feeling mentally heavy. Then there's analysis paralysis. That strange place where you know so much, think so much, research so much, that taking action becomes harder. Because now every option has pros, cons, risks, unknowns, and suddenly doing nothing feels safer. But here's the irony. Deep thinkers often search for certainty because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Yet life rarely gives complete certainty. Sometimes clarity comes after action, not before it. Because thinking deeply is a gift. But if every thought needs a perfect conclusion, your own mind can become the thing slowing you down. Sometimes the answer isn't another hour of thinking. Sometimes the answer is movement, even imperfect movement. So what's the trait deep thinkers often have? Relentless curiosity, constant questioning, a mind that searches beneath the surface. And while this can create stress, it can also create wisdom, because the people who think deeply often see things others miss. The goal isn't stopping your mind from thinking, It's learning when to explore deeper and when to let go. So now I'm curious. Do you think deeply? Or do you think too deeply? Comment below. Because sometimes understanding your mind starts with hearing how other minds work too.